It was Christmas Eve, and the hospital, normally bustling with the hum of doctors and nurses rushing through their shifts, was quieter than usual. The cold outside sent chills through the windows, but inside there was a warmth that couldn't be explained. Nurse Emily had been working in pediatrics for years, yet this holiday season felt different. She had witnessed so much over the years. Children coming in with injuries, illnesses, and heart-wrenching stories. But there was something about this one little boy that stood out. His name was Charlie, and he wasn't your typical patient. Charlie wasn't just sick. He was fighting a battle no child should ever have to face. He was in the middle of a long, painful treatment for leukemia, a fight that had drained both his body and his spirit. Nurse Emily had seen him come and go for months, always quietly observing, never asking for much, except for one thing, the Christmas gift that he'd asked for. It was a simple request, a toy car, one he dreamed of playing with when he felt better. But with his condition worsening, it seemed like the chance for that dream to come true was slipping away. Emily could see how much this little car meant to him. His small, pale face would light up every time he talked about it. Even though his energy was limited, he would talk about racing it down hospital hallways. In the dreams he clung to, there was something about that hope, that childish wish in the face of so much pain that made Emily's heart ache. With Christmas just around the corner, Emily had already bought gifts for many of her young patients, but something told her Charlie's gift needed to be special. She didn't want him to lose that last thread of joy. But as the days wore on, the reality of his condition sank in further. She watched him grow weaker, his hopes slowly fading, and it tore at her. That's when she decided to do something unexpected. Emily had no idea what she was about to do would forever change the course of her holiday, and possibly her life. One afternoon, after a long shift, Emily walked past the toy aisle in a small local store. The shelves were filled with bright colors, flashy packaging, and toys meant to bring a smile to any child's face. She glanced at the rows of cars, Hot Wheels, race cars, trucks, and models of all shapes and sizes. But one particular car caught her eye, a sleek silver race car with the same features that Charlie had dreamed about. It was perfect. Without hesitation, Emily grabbed the toy off the shelf and bought it. She didn't care about the price. All she cared about was the joy it would bring to Charlie. She could already imagine the look on his face when he saw it. Emily wrapped the gift with care, placing a small handwritten note inside, wishing him the happiest of holidays. But when the day finally came to deliver the gift, something wasn't right. The hospital was quieter than usual, and there was an unsettling feeling in the air. Emily couldn't shake the thought that something was off. She walked into Charlie's room, her heart racing with anticipation. But when she saw him, her excitement quickly turned to dread. Charlie was sitting on his bed, his face more pale than usual, his eyes distant. His parents were there too, sitting beside him, but there was a heaviness in the room, a silent sadness that spoke volumes. "Hi, Charlie," Emily said softly, trying to mask the worry in her voice. Charlie looked up weakly, a small smile tugging at the corners of his lips. But it was clear that something had changed. His usual spark, the glint of excitement when he saw her, wasn't there anymore. Instead, he seemed tired, drained from the relentless battle he was fighting. "I brought you something," Emily said, her voice shaking slightly. She handed him the gift, her hands trembling as she did. Charlie slowly took the wrapped gift from her, his hands unsteady. He looked at it for a moment, then glanced up at his mother. Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was a heaviness in the room that she couldn't ignore. It was like time stood still. as Charlie carefully pulled the wrapping off, revealing the toy car inside. He stared at it, his expression unreadable, before his eyes slowly filled with tears. Emily's heart sank. She had expected joy, a smile, maybe even a laugh, but instead, she saw a child whose dreams were slipping through his fingers. Charlie's mother, who had been quietly watching the scene unfold, finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "He's been asking for that car for weeks, Emily," she said, her voice breaking. "But—" Her voice trailed off. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she began to understand. There was something about Charlie's reaction, the tears that welled up in his eyes, that suggested more than just gratitude. It was as though he knew something she didn't. Charlie clutched the car in his hands, his lips trembling. "It's too late, isn't it?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm never going to get better, am I?" At that moment, everything around Emily seemed to fade away, her eyes blurred with tears. And she realized that despite the perfect gift, despite all the hope she had tried to bring, this Christmas wasn't going to be like any other. Charlie had given up, and she couldn't help but wonder if she had made a terrible mistake by bringing him that toy car. She stood there, frozen, unsure of what to say or do next. What had she hoped for? A miracle. A Christmas miracle that would heal Charlie and bring his dreams back to life. Before she could respond, Charlie's mother gently took his hand, offering comfort as best as she could. But Emily could see the truth in the situation now, the pain, the sorrow, and the devastating reality that she couldn't fix. Just as she was about to speak, the room grew eerily quiet, and then something unexpected happened. What happened next left Emily breathless, shaken, and forever changed. But that, my friends, is a story that can only be told later. Emily stood in the quiet room, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of Charlie's words hung in the air like a dark cloud, and for a moment she felt completely lost. She had wanted to bring joy to this little boy, to give him something to hold on to, something that would remind him of the magic of Christmas. But now, the car in his hands seemed like a cruel reminder of everything he might never experience, of the dreams that seemed so out of reach. The silence stretched on, thick and uncomfortable. Emily could hear her own breathing, shaky and uneven, as she tried to figure out how to respond. She had never been good at finding the right words in these situations. In her years as a nurse, she had faced countless challenges, helping children fight through illnesses, comforting parents who were desperate for answers. But nothing had prepared her for this moment, this sinking feeling that she couldn't fix what was broken. Charlie's mother, who had been quietly sitting at the edge of the bed, suddenly spoke up. Her voice was soft, but there was a strength in it that Emily hadn't noticed before. "Charlie," she said, her hand gently brushing through his hair, "your nurse is here because she cares. This gift, it's more than just a toy. It's a symbol of everything you fought for." Emily's eyes flickered to the mother, trying to process her words. But Charlie didn't seem to hear her. His gaze was fixed on the toy car, the only thing in the world that seemed to matter in that moment. "I don't think I'm going to make it to Christmas," Charlie murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'm too tired." The words cut through Emily like a blade. She wanted to argue, to tell him that he was wrong, that there was still time, that miracles could happen. But she knew better than anyone that sometimes there was nothing more anyone could do. Sometimes the battle wasn't against the disease. It was against time, and time was running out. Her throat tightened as she struggled to find the right thing to say. She glanced at Charlie's mother, who had tears in her eyes now. It wasn't just the pain of watching her son suffer. It was the helplessness, the uncertainty that came with knowing there were no easy answers. Emily had seen that same look in the eyes of many parents before, but it felt different now. This wasn't just any child. It was Charlie, the sweet little boy with the bright smile and endless dreams. "I'm so sorry, Charlie," Emily said, her voice breaking. She kneeled down beside him, careful not to invade his space, but close enough to show that she was there, present in this moment of sadness. "I didn't want to make you feel—" "Don't worry, Nurse Emily," Charlie interrupted softly, his fingers tracing the smooth edges of the car. "I know you did your best." Her heart ached. There was something in the way he said it that made it sound like a goodbye. Emily fought back the tears, desperately trying to keep it together. She couldn't break down in front of him. He needed someone strong, someone who could remind him of the good things, of hope. But just then, as the room grew heavier with emotion, Charlie's mother did something unexpected. She took the toy car from his hands, gently, and placed it in Emily's lap. "He's not giving up," she said, her voice steady now. "He's just afraid, like any of us would be. This car, this gift, it's not about the toy. It's about showing him he's loved. That's the only thing that can help him now." Emily stared at the car, a rush of emotions flooding her chest. She realized then that it wasn't about the car at all. It wasn't about the toy, or even the dream Charlie had. It was about the love they were all holding on to, a thread of connection that refused to be severed, no matter how dire the situation. But even with that realization, there was still an undeniable tension in the room. Emily could feel it. Charlie's fear, his resignation. His parents were fighting their own battles, trying to stay strong for him, while silently grieving their own loss. Just as Emily was about to leave, something unexpected happened. A nurse came into the room with an urgent message. "Nurse Emily, there's someone here to see you." Emily turned to face the nurse, momentarily distracted. But when she saw who it was, her heart nearly stopped. It was Dr. Reynolds, the head oncologist. His face was grim, his eyes serious. Emily had worked with him for years, but the look on his face told her everything she needed to know. Something was wrong. "Dr. Reynolds?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so Charlie couldn't hear. "We need to talk," he said, glancing at the boy before focusing back on her. "It's about Charlie." Emily's stomach dropped as she followed Dr. Reynolds down the hallway, her mind racing with the possibilities. What could he possibly have to say? Was there more news? Was Charlie's condition even worse than she'd thought? Once they reached the quiet corridor, Dr. Reynolds took a deep breath before speaking. "Emily, I need you to prepare yourself. We've run all the tests we can. I know we've been trying new treatments, but Charlie's body is no longer responding." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake. She had known deep down that Charlie was getting worse, but hearing it aloud felt like a punch to the gut. Dr. Reynolds paused, his voice softening. "We've done everything we can. His heart is weak. His body is too exhausted. The doctors have been in touch with the family. I think we're nearing the end." Emily couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She wanted to scream, to shout at the unfairness of it all. This child, this innocent soul, didn't deserve this. None of them did. "I'm so sorry, Emily," Dr. Reynolds said, his voice full of sympathy. "I know how much you care about him." But Emily barely heard him. Her mind was already back in that hospital room, with Charlie, with his fragile hope. How could she let him go, knowing there was nothing more she could do? And just as she turned to leave, she received a message on her phone. It was a note from Charlie's mother. He's asking for you. As Emily walked back to the room, her mind spun. She didn't know if she could bear what she was about to face, but there was no turning back now. As Emily walked back to Charlie's room, her heart was heavy with the weight of Dr. Reynolds' words. The hallway seemed to stretch on endlessly, each step echoing in her mind. She wasn't sure what she expected when she got there. But it wasn't the feeling of finality that gripped her chest. She had seen so many children fight, some of them winning their battles, and others, like Charlie, losing. But no matter how much she'd prepared herself for this moment, it still felt like a punch in the gut. When she stepped into the room, she found Charlie lying back against his pillows, the toy car still clutched in his small hands. His mother was sitting beside him, gently holding his hand. Her eyes filled with quiet tears. But Charlie's eyes, surprisingly, were clear. There was something different about him now. His face was still pale, and the usual exhaustion that clouded his features was there. But there was a peace in his eyes, a kind of acceptance that made Emily's heart ache even more. "Hi, Charlie," she said softly, pulling up a chair beside his bed. Charlie smiled up at her, that familiar, faint grin that had always been his trademark, even through all the pain. "Hi, Nurse Emily. I'm glad you came." Emily forced a smile, sitting down beside him. She felt a lump in her throat that she couldn't swallow. She had spent so much time trying to keep hope alive for him, but now it felt like he was the one doing the comforting. "You don't have to be brave anymore, you know," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Charlie shook his head gently. "I know, I'm okay now. I'm not afraid. I wanted to see you one last time, to thank you for everything." Emily's breath caught. She had been expecting tears, heartbreak, maybe even a plea for more time. But instead, Charlie was speaking with a calm that belied his age. It was as though, in this final moment, he had come to terms with what was happening. "The car," he said, his voice soft but sure. "I won't get to play with it. But you know what? It's okay. It's still special. It reminds me of all the things I wanted to do, all the things I dreamed of." Emily reached over and took the toy car from his hands, her own fingers trembling. "Charlie, you deserve so much more than just a toy," she whispered. He looked up at her, his gaze steady. "I had more than I ever thought I would. I had you. I had my family. I had love. That's all anyone really needs, right?" Those words struck Emily like a lightning bolt. It was a moment she would never forget. The simplicity, the wisdom in those tiny words. What Charlie had just said was what so many people, even adults, spent their whole lives trying to understand. It wasn't about the things you couldn't control. It wasn't about what you lost. It was about love, about connection, and about finding peace, even in the darkest moments. As Emily looked at Charlie, she knew that his fight had not been in vain. He had taught her something more important than any medical procedure or treatment could ever provide. He had shown her that there could be beauty in the midst of pain, peace in the midst of chaos, and that sometimes a small act of kindness, like giving a toy car, could become something far more profound, a symbol of love that transcended time and illness. Charlie's mother stood up from the bed, her voice breaking as she spoke. "He's ready, Emily. He's at peace." Emily nodded, wiping the tears that had started to fall freely. She didn't know if she was ready to let go, but she knew that Charlie had already done it, and in that, he had given her a gift she could never repay. Just as the room seemed to grow heavier with the inevitable, something extraordinary happened. Charlie's breathing slowed, but not in a way that filled the room with dread. Instead, it was as if he were falling into a peaceful slumber, surrounded by warmth and love. And with his last breath, Charlie's lips formed a small, serene smile. He was gone, but not really gone. His spirit lingered, a presence that would never fade. Emily sat there for a long time, her hand still holding the toy car. Unable to move, unable to speak, she felt the weight of it all, the pain, the loss, but also the beauty of Charlie's life, the lesson he had imparted without even knowing it. Later, as Emily stepped out of the room, her eyes swollen from the tears, the hospital felt quieter than it ever had, but there was something in the air now, a quiet peace that hadn't been there before. As she walked down the hall, she passed by other patients, other families. The reality of her job had never felt so real. She was there to heal, but sometimes healing didn't mean fixing the broken. Sometimes it was about making a difference, in a way that couldn't be measured by charts or procedures. Emily walked past the Christmas tree in the hospital lobby, the lights twinkling softly in the dimness. She had bought gifts for so many children, but it was Charlie's gift, the simple, heartfelt gesture that had truly mattered. She paused for a moment, her fingers brushing over the little ornaments on the tree. There, in the corner, was a small silver car ornament, glinting in the light. It was a reminder, a symbol of everything that had transpired. As Emily stepped outside into the cool night, she looked up at the sky. The stars were shining brightly, like little beacons of hope. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: Charlie's story wasn't over. It would live on in her, in his family, and in the hearts of everyone who had known him. And that was enough. The world may have lost a little boy that Christmas, but the love he left behind, his unshakable hope, his unyielding belief in the beauty of life, would endure.